All right, well, now that Congress has essentially abandoned the social spending bill known as Build Back Better, which would have lowered prescription drug prices, what does this mean? What are the consequences? Well, seniors, meaning retired people on fixed incomes, will now be paying more money for Medicare since pharmaceutical companies have increased the prices of literally hundreds of drugs. Now, the story about the pharmaceutical companies raising prices for pharmaceutical drugs is something that we've talked about in the past, but there are consequences to that because the increase in drug prices ends up translating to higher premiums, not just for American workers or ordinary Americans who have to pay premiums every month for their private insurance, but also the cost of Medicare goes up. And as a result, we're now seeing the highest spike in the cost of Medicare premiums ever. And I want to reiterate, we're talking about senior citizens, we're talking about individuals who are on a fixed income. And they're going to bear quite a bit of burden as a result of what corporate Democrats in the Senate have done in blocking the social spending bill. And also as a result of President Joe Biden refusing to fight aggressively for his own agenda. So let's get into the details. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, stated that monthly Medicare Part B premiums could increase nearly 15% from $148.50 in 2021 to $170.10 for 2022. Now, for some of you, you might think, well, I mean, 15% increases, sure, that's a lot. But once you see the dollar amount, once you see that increase in terms of the actual price, maybe that's not that big of a deal. But again, we're talking about senior citizens on a fixed income. And when you couple this with the fact that we do have a retirement crisis in this country where many retirees don't even have enough retirement savings to live on, this news is devastating. Now, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra is now instructing CMS to reassess the price hike. And he has an interesting argument for this. He argues that the dramatic 50% price cut of Pharma giant Biogen's controversial new Alzheimer's drug is a compelling basis for CMS to re-examine the previous recommendation. But guys, listen, I'm glad that the Secretary of Health and Human Services, someone who has supported Medicare for All, is demanding that they reassess this price hike for Medicare premiums. However, we're only talking about a price cut for one pharmaceutical drug, just one. Think about the literally hundreds of other pharmaceutical drugs that saw 5% price increases as soon as we hit the new year. And that is going to translate to higher premiums for all of us, including those who rely on Medicare. Now, as Jake Johnson had written in a piece for Common Dreams, something that we reported on earlier, enough is enough. Outrage as Big Pharma hikes prices on 442 drugs. Patients are counting on Congress, this is very sad, and the Biden administration to deliver drug pricing reforms immediately in this new year. Now, it doesn't look like that's likely to happen. And according to the healthcare firm GoodRx, the prices of 434 brand name drugs and 8 generic medicines were increased by an average of 5.2% and 4.2% respectively, beginning on January 1st of 2022. Now, there was, of course, a way to mitigate all of this. And the way to mitigate all of it, at least in terms of the Medicare system, was to allow for Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies. That was actually a very important provision within the Build Back Better agenda, which now is very unlikely to pass because corporate Democrats are insanely corrupt and they work for pharmaceutical companies as opposed to their own constituents. So Big Pharma and private health insurers have spent enormously, over $170 million in the first 9 months of 2021 alone on lobbying against popular provisions in Democrats' flagship Build Back Better Act, including allowing Medicare to negotiate lower prescription drug prices and expanding the program to include dental and vision coverage. In fact, there was a hearing on the the Build Back Better agenda, on Biden's agenda, allegedly Biden's agenda, where Bernie Sanders, I think, asked the right questions in regard to what was included in the legislation, what was included in the president's budget, and how it would actually benefit Americans, especially when it comes to astronomical drug prices. Let's watch.
To my mind, in the richest country on earth, it is hard to believe that millions of seniors don't have teeth in their mouths, don't have the hearing aids that they need, don't have the eyeglasses they need. What does the president's budget propose in terms of expanding Medicare?
Not only does the president want and expect action this year, as he called for in the joint address on prescription drugs, he expects those savings and others to be used to strengthen the Medicare and Medicaid programs with plans to enhance dental, vision, and hearing aid through those programs.
So it's not just about drug prices, it's also about all the other broken elements of our healthcare system, particularly Medicare, which is a very popular program, an important program to maintain. Obviously, it's not something I want to do away with, but it definitely needs to be improved. And one of the other provisions in that Build Back Better agenda did in fact include coverage for hearing, vision, and dental for our elderly citizens. I mean, the fact that we're denying them that coverage just gives you a sense of how insanely cruel this country really is, and how we have a system that is not working to the benefit of ordinary Americans. And again, there are real consequences to what Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have done in the Senate in blocking the passage of this bill. But also, let's not place all the blame on them. There are plenty of corporate Democrats in the Senate who would have gladly taken the place of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. If you do away with them, there are others who will pop up, whether we're talking about the Warners of the world, or Dick Durbin will come out, Chris Coons. There's always a corporate Democrat who's willing to raise his or her hand and say, no, this is actually terrible. We actually should avoid serving the best interests of our constituents. We should probably avoid making our healthcare system affordable and functioning for our people. They are never going to carry out the best interests of Americans as long as they're receiving unlimited campaign donations from pharmaceutical companies and the private insurers. And secondly, as long as they are personally invested in individual stocks pertaining to the private healthcare industry. So they can talk all they want about how they really want to change things, but as we've said on this show before, actions speak way louder than words. And we can't continue buying their campaign rhetoric and then later get completely bamboozled by these lawmakers who don't follow through on what they promise. We don't need to look into what's in their hearts or minds. All we need to do is consider the fact that people are rational actors, and they are motivated by incentives and disincentives. For someone like Joe Manchin, who has a daughter who created a monopoly for the EpiPen just so she can cash in, it's abundantly clear that the incentives are in the wrong place. Same with Kyrsten Sinema, who received an insane amount of money from the private health insurance industry during the debates over Build Back Better. That is what motivates them, nothing else. And the fact that Biden thinks that he can just, pass this corporate handout bipartisan infrastructure bill and just rely on that for re-election is laughable. They're in a lot of trouble, and to be quite honest with you, they deserve it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.